Hello, dear ones. Father Peter John coming to you from All Saints Orthodox Church in Bloomington, Indiana. Christ is in our midst. Today we're talking about step number 6 on the ladder of Divine Ascent, and that is on the Remembrance of Death. This is the book that we're speaking of by St. John Climacus. The Remembrance of Death, I'm going to give you my favorite saying from this particular chapter. He says, anyone who wishes to retain within himself continually the remembrance of death and God's judgment, and at the same time yields to material cares and distractions, is like a man who is swimming and wants to clap his hands. Seemingly impossible, right? Swimming and clasping your hands, or at least extremely difficult. What does this mean? Well, first of all, the remembrance of death. Why is it so important to remember our death? We know as Christians we're supposed to live each day as though it is our last day. It's another way of saying, pretend you're going to die today. What would you do? How would you live your life if today was your last day on earth? And the monks and the nuns talk about the importance of always having before you the remembrance of death. There are some great stories. One story that I've heard is of monks who will spend their life, much of their life, it'll take them a long time, preparing their coffin for their burial. Not so they could have a beautiful coffin, but so that when they are preparing their coffin daily, when they're working on it, that they can have the remembrance of death before them. I heard a story once of a certain priest who was very sick, and so he and his wife pre-ordered the casket that he was going to be buried in. It was a wooden casket coffin. And so it arrived. Well, he recovered from his illness, at least for a time, and ended up living another couple of years. Well, what would they do, with this coffin that they had? What they did, actually, was they set it up in their living room as a coffee table. And so it was just the remembrance of death. They'd have people over for coffee, and there was this coffin, and they would set their coffee cups on the coffin. And it was just it sounds morbid if you're in the world, but if you're in the church, you understand. It's just a healthy reminder of the fact that that's where we're all going. We're all going to go in a box. The other thing that I remember was the story of certain people who would, mainly monastics, but you don't have to be a monastic to do this, people who would pre-order a coffin, and they would order it with boards cut that would be like shelves in the coffin. They would set it up on end, put the shelves in it, put their icons in there, and that would be their icon corner. So they would always have this remembrance of death as they were doing their prayers. It'd help them, I guess, to focus their prayers. So anyway, all of these different stories and ideas suffice it to say that it's important for us to live our life, again, as though every day were our last, and to always remember our death, because that's what this whole life is. It's preparation for death. We're preparing now for what is to come. In this life, the way that we live, the way that we love, the way that we receive the grace and mercy and joy of Christ, all of these things are going to follow us to the grave and into the next life. So may God grant us the remembrance of death, and may He help us always to have the fervor that we should have when we approach Him, when we serve our neighbor, in all that we do, knowing that for all of us the end will come, that the veil will drop, that we will be able to see clearly, and then we will meet the Lord. Christ is in our midst. He is and ever shall be.